Hey everyone, welcome back to the Invincible Innovation Podcast, the podcast for change makers and innovators shaping the future of our world. I'm your host, Mazor, Kario, product design and AI expert, and in this episode, we sit down with an AI developer to dive into the world of generative AI, exploring its potential to revolutionize software development and uncover valuable insights for developers looking to harness its powers. Join us as we uncover the possibilities and challenges of this emerging technology. And I have a very special guest. Hi, Shavi.
Hello, hello. It's a pleasure being here
I,
again.
yeah, I'm so happy to see you again. So we had already have a talk with Shavi when we met in Amsterdam in the GDE program, and afterwards I'll tell some things about the way that we know each other. But Xavier Portilla Edo is the head of cloud infrastructure of Voiceflow, and we know each other from the Google programs, and we met in the past. And it's always a pleasure talking to you. So, other than the fact that he knows so much, he's such a great guy. So it's always a pleasure talking to him.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, and we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're so invited to join the discussion and ask questions. And now we can start. Before we start to go into the details, just say what is generative AI and how is it changing the landscape of software development?
So, generative AI is refers to a class of like artificial intelligence that is designed to generate content, simulate human-like behavior, or create new data. It's basically you are gonna prepare like a prompt, or you're gonna specify what you want, and then those generative AI models are gonna generate whatever you want. Like for instance, classic ChatGPT or Gemini thing, like that it's text generation. Um, you're gonna specify, I don't know, like write uh, like a essay, for example, and then it will generate an essay with all the things that you have mentioned. If you specify, or if you are talking, for instance, with Midjourney, you are gonna create a prompt that it will generate an image. And for instance, like the last thing that has been released last week, which is Sora from OpenAI. Well, I think that's OpenAI research. That's not public yet, but you are gonna create a prompt, and it will generate a super realistic video. And
Yeah.
in terms of software development, like it is changing the landscape by automating certain aspects of the development process, such as like code generation, design creation, and assisting in problem solving. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah.
So we're saying that the prompt is like the request. It's like a sentence, and it's creating from this request either a text or a code or an image or a video, as you mentioned. So as a coder, I'm usually writing text, which is a code actually, and now ChatGPT or Gemini, whoever, could write the code for me. It means that they don't need developers anymore. Where is the place that they are needed?
They are needed. There's one important thing, like, I mean, even like there are like really good tools out there in terms of like software development, like Do It AI, or like Copilot, GitHub Copilot, that are generating a really great source code. And there are also another tools that are like analyzing the code, like the prompt itself. It's like, hey, this is my code. I try to find issues or vulnerabilities, or just like, I don't know, like test my code in terms of not running the code, in terms of just evaluating the code. There are good tools out there, but they are not at the very end, they are not as good as humans. Of course, they will find some stuff that you will not find, because you are like super obfuscated in your code, and or probably there are like there's some specific things that you don't know as a developer, like, I don't know, like a rule or an injection problem or something like that, that the AI or the developer tools can help you with that, and say, like, hey, heads up, here you have an issue, and you will, you will know that. But they will not replace humans or developers. They are really good co-workers or teammates, like working with these tools, it will enhance your source code by a lot, that's 100%, but they will not replace humans, at least for now.
Yeah. So what we're saying, it's only like the basics of the coding, but the high level logic or infrastructure or the way that the code is built is more complex than just
Exactly.
taking parts of what you get in GitHub and getting it into the code.
Exactly. And another important thing is the context itself. Like, and as you said, like, for instance, the infrastructure could be a context. Like, let's say that you're writing a code, a Python code, and that code is gonna be deployed on, let's say, AWS Lambda. Um, the Copilot, for instance, does not know that it's going to be deployed on AWS Lambda. And for instance, it could be that for AWS Lambda, you will need some specific stuff, and that's part of the context. Or if we are talking about the organization itself, like, like, each organization has its its own, like, naming conventions, like, like patterns and all that stuff. Like, the AI, like, that is super hard to understand or to get, like, and that's part of the context. So that's why the human part of thing in this case is also important.
I see. So what developers must know about AI?
So the developers should have, like, a fundamental understanding of machine learning and deep learning concepts. I think right now, like in the past, like, a developer should know about Git, about programming, like what is a for loop, what is a while loop, if else sentence, these kind of things. But right now, I think AI and machine learning, they should have, like, very, like, learn at least the basics. Uh, and also, like, have, like, knowledge about various AI algorithms and frameworks, because they should also be aware of the ethical considerations, data privacy issues, and the potentials biases in AI models, at least if they are using these kind of tools. Because, like, what I've seen in the past is, like, people not write, like, copy pasting a code that has been generated by an AI and just click on run. Not only that, but, like, just copy pasting these kind of things without understanding first, um, what is the code generated. Is the code generated, like, is something that makes sense? Is this safe to be executed? Imagine that I'm using GPT or Gemini. Are those models, how are those models being trained? Like, how, like, why is why I'm having these outputs? Or in terms of, like, the prompt that I use to generate this code, is this correct? I am specifying what I want properly. So yeah, it's something that the developers must know. And for instance, in ChatGPT, there's like, small wording at the bottom that tells you, be careful, because this is an auto-generated response that can be not fully true, or could be even false. So the developers have to have that on mind, every single time.
So, other than knowing code really well and finding if this is the right code, that they got the right answer, if it's structured well and it has no vulnerabilities and it's even risky, other than that, the fact that I know how to ask the question or the prompt is important in order to get the right result. Or you're saying because we're going to develop so much AI features and AI related products, we need to understand that even further.
Yeah, like both things. Like you have to understand every single output, and you have to understand as well like what you are requesting, you know, like because if you are requesting something that you don't even understand, the output is gonna be like, you know, like okay, whatever. But you have to make sure that every single output, or at least every single line that is in that output, you understand it and you can safely use it, or not just using it, like modify in the way that works in your source code. It's like, for instance, when you are searching for a problem on Stack Overflow, you will see like um, a lot of like piece of codes, you know, like little blocks with possible solutions, like hey, I solved this by doing this, I solved this by doing that. But you have to understand like how to extract the main idea of that and put that in your source code, you know.
Mhm. And do you think that they need to even understand data science, data engineering, because they're going to integrate these kinds of capabilities within their products?
No, I mean that's not like a requirement, but it is important to know the model that you are using, you know, like it is important to know that you are using Gemini, and Gemini, for instance, is good at creating this kind of code, or you are using GPT-4 and GPT-4 is good at Python, for example. That's the most important thing. And also to understand like the common issues depending on the model that you are using, you know, that is important. The
Yeah.
knowing data science or all these kind of things, of course, is not like easy, it is not required, but knowing what you are interacting with, that is important.
So, how do they close this gap? I'm currently a Python developer. I know how to do here. I'm not, let's say I'm not very senior. I'm just beginning. How do I work with these kinds of tools other than being a senior, understanding exactly how the code needs to be, and then it's either writing it yourself or just browsing someone AI solution.
Yeah, that is gonna be like basically trying it out. For instance, you can like enable Copilot. If you are using Visual Studio Code, you can enable Copilot on your Visual Studio Code and see like how that works in terms of Python code. Like try that in a Python project, or in a Golang project, or in a Java project, and see how that goes. And also in different, like not only depending on the language, like in the, if you are generating or building like documentation, like see if that is good for documentation. And then switch, you can switch to another model, like you can also enable Duet AI or Gemini in your Visual Studio Code. You have to turn off Copilot and then see how that goes. And and check exactly the same, like Python, Golang, Java, um, documentation, and you're like trying to understand. Of course, you can read and you can search on the internet, you know, about like which one is better for. But the most important thing here is to try it out. There are also another Visual Studio Code plugins that allows you to connect um, to your like own LLMs. Let's say that you have deployed on your end like version of Gemma or Llama or any fine tune, because there are large language models
Open source.
that are being fine tuned. For instance, I saw on Twitter a lot of large language models that are like, instead of using, for instance, directly GPT-4 or Gemini, they are getting Llama 2 or Gemma, and they are fine tuning for a specific language.
Yeah.
Uh,
So,
so
these are like open source, and the OpenAI and Gemini are third parties that you're using. Uh,
Exactly, exactly,
in both cases, you need to understand the input and output structure for the model. And,
exactly,
and what you're saying, you need to try it out. It's not enough just to copy paste it, because in many cases it will not work, or it will not work the way that you want it to be. So,
exactly,
so do
exactly.
you think that some of the developers need to learn new capabilities in order to work, or even study new? I know that most of developers, they know how to teach themselves. They go to YouTube, they are going to blogs, and they read whatever they need. But do you think it's a different capacity this time?
The I would say yes, because I think the paradigm here is different. We are not talking about like classic programming languages paradigm. We are talking here about a whole new thing, which is generative AI and apply as software development, which is basically you are gonna have a copilot, a teammate that is gonna help you in so many ways. So you have to like at least learn what is a large language model, how are these outputs being generated, like for instance, like what is uh, libraries that are used for these things, like langchain, like how can I fine tune a large language model. Of course that could be optional, but that is also good, because if you want to improve the information of a large language model, like learning about fine tuning, that is also important. Retrieval augmented generation, that is also important. Like what is RAG, how or what is the context that is being used for a large language model while I am developing. Because, for instance, when you have enabled Copilot, you have to know that the context that is being in use is the windows that you have open. So for instance, if imagine that you have like 9 windows, and for your current problem of the active window, the other 8 windows are not important. Probably the output that you are going to have is going to be less accurate, so
Mhm.
these kind of things are things that you have to know.
I see. So what are some challenges and limitations using generative AI in development?
uh, I mean, the challenges, as I said, include like potential biases in generated content, uh, lack of creativity compared to humans, and the need of like large data sets, and also limitations include difficulty in handling complex real world scenarios and potential security concerns. Like you can get generated code that could have like a leak, for example, and you don't even notice that. And or when you have like a really complex problem, the LLM or the output or it cannot can is not gonna be able to solve this kind of like really complex
Yeah.
issues.
You mentioned the security leaks, which is not unintentional, but in some cases, when you take parts of a code from the outside and you take it into your code, it could have vulnerabilities and even intentional harm within the code itself.
Exactly,
And you
exactly,
need to understand that.
exactly. Because for instance, Copilot, that is like the data set that has been used to like for Copilot is basically the entire GitHub, and all not all the GitHub is written nicely, is not like perfect. There are like vulnerabilities out there. Like for instance, when you are like typing a Copilot and you are saying, for instance, something like a string password equals, and then Copilot is generating a password for you, that means that someone on GitHub has a password. and that's why Copilot knows that pattern, so that's important to know.
Yeah, but how is it different than me going to GitHub, taking a code, a block, and then integrating it? If I'm doing it manually, do I have more control? It's the same risk, no?
It's the same risk, but you have to be aware of that, like, I mean, as you mentioned, like, it's could be the same, because you can just copy paste that piece of log that you found on GitHub, and that piece of code can have vulnerabilities as well. That's true, but
Yeah,
you have to learn that the code that is being generated is not 100% perfect, like, um and I know, like, could be better, could be worse, but like, you have to check at least
yeah.
every single line.
Yeah, so till now we talked about generative AI as a tool for development, for writing code. Now I want to talk about using your knowledge in development in order to write features, capabilities, or product based on models. It could be third party like Gemini and OpenAI and Claude, or open source. So, what developers need to know, I guess you will have more and more of these cases integrating AI capabilities within your product.
So for that, even like if you are using like a third parties or an open source, for instance, the open source, you can deploy those on your own if you have like the powerful computer, but you can also deploy them on Google Vertex, or for instance on Amazon Bedrock, just with
Cloud.
one, yeah, in the cloud. Just with one click you can go there, select the model that you want to run, and deploy them. And not only that, for instance, with, I think is Gemma, or Gemini Nano. Yeah, I think Gemini Nano. Those can be executed in a mobile phone. So that's also really, really cool. Of course, the capabilities are like very tight to the size of that LLM, but like, can be run in a phone. So like, that's the main thing, like, which LLM I want to use it. And once you have decided those LLMs and you want to build like generative AI tools, I think the developers should be familiar with popular AI frameworks, like, for instance, LangChain, if you are gonna build uh, like text generated tools, like chat apps, or like, yeah, everything related to text, I would recommend to use LangChain, TensorFlow, PyTorch, and then tools for like natural language processing, like SpaceI, and NLTK, and then everything related to AI, like OpenAI itself, Google Vertex AI. Also on Google Vertex AI, you have like Model Garden, where you can play and build whatever you want, like fine tune your LLMs. You can create data stores, and connect that with an LLM, and create your retrieve augmented generation platform. And on AWS, Amazon, you have Amazon Bedrock. You have Party Rock as well, which is a no-code tool where you can build a lot of generative AI applications. That is really, really cool. I highly recommend to start with something like that, with Party Rock. And also with OpenAI, you can create your custom GPTs. You can create those the functions that can be called from a LLM. So these kind of things. And yeah, like, you will need to understand cloud computing services and also version control. I think that's also crucial, because when we are talking about generative AI in terms of development, when you want to build something using an LLM, I think not all the people knows about the compute cost of it, like because when you're using or the GPT-4 or Gemini, that's an API that you can call and that's it. But those models are already deployed. But what happens when you need like a really specific scenario that you have to fine tune a model, or when you have to create your own retrieve augmented generation use case? Like, how can I build this? How can I create these kind of things? Those are like quite complex scenarios, and you have to understand the everything related to cloud computing, how much it costs per month, just to not to have surprises, because those things are not cheap.
Right, right. And you need GPUs and you need very powerful computing, and you need to calculate the size of the model, how complex it is, and how many calls would you have, how many interactions would you have, how long would it be, the output, the input, because you're paying per token or per the numbers, the number of words. It's like tokens. So you need to calculate that. Right now, people think, okay, it's like just talking to OpenAI and calling it each time. More or less, they could calculate. In the case that they're building their own model or using an open source model, and based on that, training could cost a lot. It takes a lot of time, lots of data need to go, and calculations in the model. So what you're talking about cost is something that I think most people are less aware of. There,
Exactly.
because it's very different than normal cost of just deploying a server somewhere in AWS, and that's it. It's much more expensive.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I know that like Gemini and OpenAI, like they have democratized the AI to everyone, because also the APIs that they are exposing are like really, really, really easy to use. That's why the generative AI paradigm has been like explode, because the APIs. I mean, like if even if you are like at in the first year of your grade, you will be able to build something with generative AI. That's 100%. But even like all the people can access an API, that doesn't mean that the compute under the hood is not something volatile. It's there, and it has some cost.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I'm currently, I've already created a course for launching generative AI products from the business side, not from the technology. And one of the things that was raised is the business model, the cost, the pricing. It's very important in these kinds of capabilities. And generative AI has lots of capabilities, but you need to understand what's the value and how do you price it. And it's important.
Exactly, exactly. That's a good point, especially when you're building a Gen AI product. You have to, when you are like building or creating your pricing model, you have to take into consideration, like, okay, if let's say that I have like a start or like a enterprise tier that is like $100, for example. You have to know, or you can do two things: the GenAI usage added to that base of 100, or include that there. And when, for instance, like specifying a quota, and then when you get to the quota limit, then people cannot use the
Right.
tool, or they need to pay more to increase the quota, or these kind of things. Because yeah, things can be go like super crazy, and that's a really good point.
Yeah, because most people when they price their product, it's a fixed price monthly or yearly, whatever.
Exactly.
But the usage is based on usage. How long is the output? How long is the input? And this is the price that you're paying for the models or for the computing powers or for OpenAI, ChatGPT, or Gemini, whatever. And you need to calculate the gap. And in some cases, you could lose money because people are going to use it more than what they paid for.
Yes.
And this is what is happening right now with GitHub, with a Copilot. Copilot is, in some cases, they're losing money. It's like $20 a month for the, I think, for the basic, and in some
Yes.
cases, people are using $80. And currently, this is what happens right now. And you know, they're just beginning. They want everyone to use it, and then they capture the audience, and they have more users, and then they could change it. But this is what happens right now. And one more thing that they all hope for, and this is why NVIDIA is so successful right now, that the chips will be faster and then they could use it in a better way and then the price will go down. This is what they hope for. We all hope for it will be less expensive.
I mean, there's gonna be like big improvements. That's 100%, and I know that Nvidia and all the chips and like micros related companies are working on that. But there's we will need to wait a little bit until we see the final outcome of those companies.
I see. So what skills do developers need in order to excel in building generative AI solution and using these kinds of powers?
Uh, I mean, I think skills include like proficiency in programming languages, like deep understanding of machine learning algorithms, domain specific knowledge, and the ability to work with large data sets. And then communication and collaboration skill are also essentials, for every single interdisciplinary teamwork. But for these kind of things, I think at least ML, domain specific knowledge, how an LLM works, how uh, yeah, like the retrieval augmented generation works, like how all these things work. I think that's like basic for every single Gen AI builder, I would say.
Mhm. So the first skill that we already talked about is the option to teach yourself things and go and look further and look for more data and more information and knowledge and learn. And from what I know about developers, most of them, the good ones for sure, this is what they're doing. They're always learning and growing and they're very enthusiastic about what they do, developers, in many cases, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's something like because right now with internet, like you can just search whatever you want to learn, and it's gonna be like a free YouTube, like video, or a free YouTube course, or like, or you can go to Coursera and just like see or search for something that it will cost you, I don't know, like $20, and that's it. So I think it's like self-learning, it's very, very, very important, and also trying to be or to learn like the cutting edge technology, also like read the latest news, for instance, like reading, I don't know, like pages like InfoQ, like TechCrunch, like this on this kind of like online websites that you can have like free content, up to date information, and then like studies from other big companies, and that's really, really important.
So I'm just wondering, you're working in Voiceflow for a few years, right? Like 2 years, something like that, right?
3 years.
3 years. So you started working there, and then OpenAI came, ChatGPT went out, right? So how did you change what you're doing? What was this change for you when ChatGPT came? Because
So
Voiceflow, just tell us a bit about the company. It's related to what we're talking about, right?
exactly. So it was a massive change. Like we were creating, like assistants, chatbots in right now, I would say in a classic way, which is using like natural language understanding, like those intense utterances, triggering flows, and all that stuff. And right now, thanks to ChatGPT, thanks to the LLMs, we have introduced a bunch of generative AI capabilities. For instance, We have added a knowledge base, which is we are doing or we are exposing a node code tool to execute retrieve augmented generative actions. Just going to Voiceflow, going to knowledge base, and uploading your documents. That will store all the information into vector databases, and you have to not to deal with any infrastructure, with nothing. It's just like a few clicks. And then, for instance, with the intents and the entities, there's a button that instead of like generating 3 4 intents, there's a button that is generate more intents, and it will generate like 5 10 10 new intents. And also Voiceflow is like a drag and drop blocks, and then you link all the blocks by creating flows basically. And the output that you are gonna say to your end user, like for instance, is when you interact with a chatbot, instead of telling to the user every single time that you are interacting with the chatbot, like just saying hi, hello, how are you, and all that stuff, you can, instead of putting that, you can use generative AI, open AI under the hood, to have like a personalized warm welcome message to the user, like these kind of things. Like it's not like a competitor, it's like a, like a friend that is helping us to create more human reliable conversations basically.
Yeah. So the last or two conversations ago, I had an AI conversational designer, and they she works in a very similar company doing very similar things, and she mentioned that the manual work that you had before ChatGPT created something very specific. And now they need to have more guardrails, to make sure that the answers are exactly what they need and it's not divergent from exactly what is needed. And I think that she even gave an example that one of their customers is a car dealer or something like that. And the answer he got is the end customer of this car dealer is to go to the competitors. So the chat GPT is much more diverse, and it has various answers. So how do you do these guardrails, to make sure that they get exactly what they want and they don't get what they don't want?
So yeah, that's something that we have seen, but instead of car dealers with shoes dealers, like we have seen something, yeah, like kind of different. Like you were requesting like shoes from one manufacturing, and then the shoes that were recommended were from another manufacturer. So the most important thing here is, what I would say is, like, first, like adding as much of guardrails that you can add in the prompt, specifying like a really good context in terms of, like, you are this car dealer, you cannot recommend cars from another, this is the user input, please generate an output that makes blah 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 blah. These are the banned words, like generating a really 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 good prompt, and adding really good context. Of course, like, that is not only the only thing that you can do. Aside from that, what I would suggest is to generate test automatically automated test, sorry, that you can run to check that everything is working fine. Because one important thing when you are working with LLMs is, like, for instance, let's say that you at certain point you want to move from GPT 3.5 Turbo to GPT 4, or from Gemini 1 to Gemini 1.5. The most important thing that you have to know is the LLM, the output can change a lot. So not only having a really good prompt with, like, that you think that is working fine, like having those tests will help you as well. Because for instance, on our end, like on Voiceflow, when we change like a root prompt, which is like something that is internal and it's working fine, when we have changed the LLM from GPT 3.5 Turbo to GPT-4, everything was not working well. So having good prompt, adding good context, adding banned phrases, adding banned words, having really good guardrails in your prompt, that's something that helps. But creating a test, that's something that helps as well.
Yeah. Another thing that is important, I think what is very different in generative AI is that in a regular code, you usually create a code, you publish it, and then it works. And it's not supposed to break other than if something else related to it is broken and then it doesn't work. But in the case of generative AI, everything could change all the time because the prompts or the requests from the end users could change and the model could change and the context could change, and then you need to monitor it all the time, which is
Exactly.
not a regular code.
Exactly. And you have to, like, yeah, as you said, like, monitor everything, because you don't know how the users are going to interact with your generative AI apps, and you have to be really like, you have to be aware of all the generated outputs to check, okay, here is something wrong. For instance, like last week, what happened with Air Canada, that the generative their chatbot that is using generative AI, um, that chatbot was specifying, I think was an insurance that it does not exist.
Mhm.
So end users that had that problem, they just took a screenshot and they said to Air Canada, your chatbot is telling me that you have this insurance, and this issue that I had, it will be covered with a screenshot. And now the end user, they won the lawsuit. So
Yeah. So this is something that we were thinking. We talked about security risks. This is what we call hallucinations, when the AI is saying something very surely and it looks like it's the truth, but it's making it up. And,
exactly.
and it happens. It happens, and you don't know exactly. It's like a black box that you don't know exactly what would be generated,
Exactly.
and that's a risk, and that's why you need to monitor it all the time. Do you feel
Exactly.
that some of the brands are reluctant to use it because of these kinds of risks?
I mean, they are trying to using it, but I don't know, because one thing that I've seen is there are a lot of brands, they have introduced it just because it's Gen AI and they want to add, like the AI brand to their brand. And there are certain brands that have been added the AI capabilities without sense. Uh, but I mean, they are not hesitant, because sometimes, because that depends on the use case. If we are talking about healthcare, insurances, banking, I would say yes, but for the other brands, not so much. There was, like a year ago, they were like quite hesitant, but right now I think they are moving towards an AI, like event driven, I would say. But at least for those that are not managing PI data, or like health data or these kind of things, or personal information data or banking data. But yeah, I think people or brands are using more and more Gen AI capabilities, but my feeling is that not all of them are using it in a proper way, or in a way that makes sense. Like, is when the mobile apps boom, like all the people were creating mobile apps, and at the end those mobile apps could be replaced by a website, you know, like the mobile app was not even needed. So you have to make sure that what you are adding to your business in terms of Gen AI or just AI makes sense before adding it.
Yeah, I think that you're right. It's like a buzz that everybody's thinking about. It has lots of capacity that are underused, that are not really utilized well, and there are some capacities that everybody's using in some cases, and it's
Exactly.
not justified. For example, it's like maybe it's better to just write some kind of search in your application or a button that will give you this result instead of developing an assistant that asks questions and you need to write a full sentence and you know what I'm looking for, just give it to me, it doesn't matter. And
Exactly.
maybe in the back end, it's using generative AI in order to summarize, in order to analyze, in order to whatever. But in the end, I get an answer. It doesn't matter if I press a button or I wrote a sentence in the assistant.
Exactly. Exactly. You have to not to go crazy because there's a ton of investment in these AI things, and it's like, does this make sense? You know, like you have to make a step back and see if that makes sense. Because at the end, you could spend or you can start like a project that will cost you, I don't know, like let's say $100,000, and then who is gonna use it? No one, you know. So you have to make sure that you are adding value.
Yeah, I totally agree. What we talked about in the beginning of our talk about the cost and the pricing and the gap between the both of them, and what we're talking about is the value that it needs to be justifiable, that users really need it, and it's the best way to solve what they're doing instead of doing it differently. And in some cases, the fact that you want to integrate the technology in order to say that you're innovative and you have like a better than the competitors or something like that, in some cases it's not justifiable enough from the business point of view. Which is, I think, the most important part because technology is not built just for technology. It's built for people to use and for their own solving their own pains and problems, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we're almost done, and I have many more questions, but I'm going to ask you two more things. What's your number one tip for developers today?
So I would say like have an open mindset and be adaptable with all the changes that are coming. Be up to date. That's 100%. Like nowadays, and that's something that we have seen with you know, this Gen AI boom. Like even in 2019, like, and today was like something different. So yeah, be really open and be adaptable, and because the field of AI is basically dynamic and technologies evolve quite rapidly. Continuous learning, curiosity are essential, I think, for staying relevant and contributing to the advancements in AI.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Shavi. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and it's fun. But I think that our listeners got lots of tips and things that they need to go and work on, like homework, from this talk. So I thank you for that, for all the insights. And where could people hear more about what you're doing and contact you if you have any like questions that they have?
Thanks for having me.
Sure. And like it's LinkedIn is the best way to contact you. This is what I added to
Yes,
the
LinkedIn, Twitter. There's my username is there at Savidop. I have a YouTube channel as well where I
Oh,
upload.
really? I didn't know that. How didn't I know that?
I
You
mean,
have a YouTube channel that is for developers?
yeah, it's more for my focus as well is conversational AI and also using Gen AI. So yeah, like you can find a lot of content related there about conversational AI, chatbots, assistants, and all that stuff.
Wow.
So
Yeah, it reminds me that I think that we met each other as the assistant experts, both of us, right? And And
Yes.
now we both moved to the MLAI, like everybody else from this technology point of view.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Wow. So thank you again, Xavi. It's been a pleasure having you here. So thanks.
Was
And
a
to all
pleasure.
of, sure. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. And if you found this episode valuable, you're invited to share it. I'll see you next week with another innovative, insightful talk. See ya.
Bye bye.